My grandfather had a grocery store, and he knew the Ringlings very well. And if you get the book, Ringlingville, I'm quoted in there at least a half a dozen times of different stories from Mr. App, who wrote the book. It really means something. I mean, I do not receive any financial from the Circus Museum. It doesn't matter if they have 2 people or 500 people a day. But I'm part of the community, and I hope that it continues to prosper and go a long ways. And it makes me feel good that we have it in the city of Baraboo. There's other people coming in?
I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. Small crowd today, very small crowd. And everything today. The weather's kept people away. I retired in 1990, but I like to be active in a lot of different organizations. And somebody said, why don't you work with a volunteer for the circus? I said, okay, what do I have to do? And she said, you could be a circus guide. I said, I do not know anything about that, really. And she said, you can learn. So I went up to the library and I learned, and here I am. This is my 23rd year, and it may be my last because it's interfering with my golf game.
What have you enjoyed the most about all the years of volunteering here?
Well, there's really 2 things. That question's been asked a few times. Number 1 is the employees here are really good. And you know, being a volunteer, you don't get paid, so I can give the people my opinion. And the second thing is meeting the people that come in. And they have different ideas, different questions every day, and there's a different situation every single day is different. The first wagon that we're going to show is Mother Goose. This is the Mother Goose wagon, built in 1882. And everything that you see that's yellow on this wagon is gold leaf. Gold leaf is very, very interesting how they did that. And I was fortunate enough to be here about 20 years ago due to the fact that they called Tony D'Angelo from Chicago, Illinois. He is known as the #1 gilder in America. He came with his crew up here. What they did, they sandpapered everything that had to be gold leaf. After they had it sandpapered, they had a sticky substance. It was just like water or oil, and they put that on what they thought they could do in 1 day of gold leaf. They laid tarp on the floor, and that was it. Well, gold leaf comes in 3 1/8 inch squares, 1/35 millionth of an inch thick. At that time, when gold was real cheap, every one of those squares ran $3.25. They had 25 in a package, separated by paper, special paper. An old shaving brush, like the old mugs that you saw or have seen in the movies. You take one of those, and naturally I had to try it, because how could I explain to people if I didn't try it? 3 times I tried putting it on. I couldn't do it. Before I got on the wagon, it fell on the ground. That means I owe the circus $9.75. That's okay, they're still trying to collect. They'll never collect that amount of money. I'm not worried about that. And this wagon is also gold leaf. You'll notice the amount of gold leaf on this wagon, which is called the Ringling Brothers Band Wagon. That was built in America because look how fat those wheels are. Very big fat wheels. Secondly, about this, the band would be up on top, and they had the mirrors, which is really something for this wagon. Now, this particular wagon was built in 1903. 1903 is a very historical place in the history of circuses. Barnum and Bailey. Barnum died in about 91, and Bailey died in about 93, 94. They both died, and in 1907, Barnum and Bailey was for sale. The people that owned it didn't care about it anymore. So what happened was, Ringlings, these upshoots from Baraboo, Wisconsin, bought out Barnum and Bailey for $425,000 in 1907. Barnum and Bailey in 1897 decided to go to Europe because they had everything they wanted in America. But to more money and more people and more prestige, they decided to go to Europe with the entourage. That is probably the biggest mistake they've ever made, but that's beside the point. So what happened was the Ringlings moved into the eastern part of the United States because Barnum and Bailey went to Europe. And they did a fabulous job. 1903, like I mentioned, they were coming back to America, and all the newspapers and everything else, Barnum and Bailey coming back to America after the great, great big tour of Europe. The Ringlings said, we've got to do something to offset this. So they ordered 6 wagons that they did not get from their cousins. Now I'm going to go back a little bit. Mr. Ringling came from Germany. Rugeling, his real name was. He met his wife, Juliard. She came from France. They met in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which was a German town, and she had 2 sisters. Both sisters were living in Milwaukee, and then they moved to Baraboo. He married Juliard. They decided to go to Baraboo to be with the family, 3 sisters, Baraboo. So what happened was, Mr. Ringling was what they would call a harness maker, leather goods. He did great work. He was a perfectionist. But to be honest with you, he couldn't make a living, so they moved all over to Iowa, northern Wisconsin, and back to Baraboo. And a little bit about the family. They had 11 children. 11 children. 3 died in infancy. 8 survived. 7 boys and 1 girl. Now, when I give these tours and so forth, I give you maybe 5 minutes on each of the boys and the girl and so forth. We don't have that time, so therefore I'll condense and give you a little bit as we go along, and I'll try to combine 5 hours in within an hour. The 5 brothers that they had, they bought out the Ringlings, the Barnum and Bailey. They bought them out, $425,000. The Ringling brothers went up to the brothers, their cousins. You see, I mentioned the other 2 daughters, sisters that moved to Baraboo. One was a Gollmar, Gollmar. They had 5 sons. They also were in the circus between 1891 and 1917. They were the 3rd largest circus in America. The Gollmar brothers. We have some wagons, and I'll point that out to you later. The others were the wagon makers. Millers, they call themselves, although it was spelled Mueller. They were the wagon makers for the Ringlings. The Gollmars made a lot of the wagons themselves, plus they bought wagons from the Ringlings. Now, I'm going to tell you about that. The wagons that you see throughout here have been with many circuses. It's like a used automobile. Just think about this. A circus comes to town. They used to have horses, and they parade the town. After 5 years, it was the same wagon. They didn't want it. People didn't want to see it. So what did they do? They'd sell the wagon to a smaller circus. That circus didn't want to have that same wagon, so what would they do? They changed the color. They changed the theme. They did something to the wagon that wouldn't make it look like it was a former circus. When they come into town here, we have a library and resource center at the end of this complex that every day they get at least 100, maybe 50, 75 inquiries throughout the world. That is the #1 museum for circuses. We look it up in the book. They didn't have motion pictures in those days. They didn't have cameras. They didn't have things of that type. What did they do? They wrote everything. We looked it up. I got my background by going there and studying what they were doing all those years. Therefore, every wagon that you see here has been bought and handed down. The average time a wagon has been sold is about 5 times. We've had some sold 9 times, but 5 times is the average. So therefore, that gives you some idea of what the situation is. We'll continue now. This wagon is probably, as we looked it over, the oldest wagon we have in existence. This goes back to 1850 that we have gone that far. Notice the 6-foot wheels in the back, the small ones in the front. Up in the top, that's the brake. You notice the brake on here? And this wagon, the Bostock Wamble wagon, is probably our oldest wagon. Now, European wheels, you saw that, small wheels. This wagon, the giraffe wagon, you notice it? If you come here, it's all padded on the inside. The wagon goes down there and up on the top, and the feed for the giraffe food is in here. When this wagon is pulled by a team of horses, it won't hurt the giraffe's neck and it won't knock him down because it's all padded. Now, you can tell it's an American wagon with the size of the wheels that it does have on it. Therefore, this giraffe wagon has really been a showcase in the parades because the giraffe would stand up and stick his neck out and his face way over the end of the wagon. The hippopotamus wagon has a 300-gallon bottom here, a little tank that holds 300 gallons of water. The middle of the wagon is built out, and the back is the same as the wagon. So the hippo would go into the water, come out, turn around, and go over and get his feed or lie down in the back. Notice how fat the wheels are. This wagon, you notice the sign up there. Hippopotamus from the River Nile. Well, I get a kick out of this when I give these tours to school kids or young kids. Do you ever notice the water from the River Nile never evaporates? It's always the same level every day. You know why? 2 o'clock in the morning, a little boy comes with a hose and fills it up, the stuff that's evaporated or left out. So that's what's happened. I try to be as accurate as I can, but sometimes I have to tell you a story like that. So I know that you'll enjoy that. But this is the hippo wagon. This is the Gomar brothers wagon, which are the first cousins of the Ringlings. It's called the kangaroo wagon. This was an original Ringling brothers wagon. The Gomars built this into a kangaroo wagon, and you notice the wheels, nice big fat wheels. It was an American wagon built by the Miller brothers, the other first cousins of the Ringlings. The Ringlings and the Gomars were very, very close people. We're going to tell you about this wagon. According to historians, not me, but real historians, this was the greatest wagon ever built. Believe it or not, this wagon in 1903 cost $4,000. That's including all of this work done by a man by the name of Samuel Robb, R-O-B-B. He was known as the Michelangelo of his time. You can look him up on Facebook or the internet. This picture, how many people out there have ever been to the Rotunda in the capital of the United States? As you walk into the Rotunda, there are 7 murals. One is by Mr. John Vanderlyn, Christopher Columbus Discovering America. This is the exact duplicate. This is the duplicate of Christopher Columbus Discovering America. All of this work was done without the tools, the equipment that we have today. Today, this wagon is worth over $500,000. It's unbelievable. When we get to the other side, we'll talk about that. But meanwhile, just take a look at the work, the intricacy of this work that was done by Samuel Robb, built by the Sebastian Wagon Company of New York City in 1903. Now on this side, you're seeing Pocahontas saving the life of John Smith All you people go back in history and you know what I'm talking about. This is the Pawnee Bill wagon. Just to give you some little examples. This wagon, the other side, this side, they made changes because this was for Barnum and Bailey. Other people used this wagon and they wanted to make a change. It was so great, so they changed the headpiece on the Native American. The other side, they changed a mustache on Pawnee Bill. Things of that sort, that's what they did. Take a look again. Big fat wheels. Like I mentioned, 1903, this wagon was built. They had a band up on top. These two wagons are the only two wagons in existence today, given to Baraboo from the Sir Robert Fawcett Circus of London, England. It is still in existence, this circus. These are telescopic wagons, the only two telescopic wagons in existence. To give you an example, this one, which is called the twin line wagon, goes up 17 feet 7 inches. This one, the Gladiator wagon, goes up 17 feet. They have, and later you can see, a mechanism that was done in 1880, 1870. They did this mechanism. It's all hollow on the inside of both of these because you crank, like the old Model T. Remember how you used to crank the Model T? Here it is. That would go up 17.7. You crank it here, that'd go up 17 feet. It comes back down into the bottom, and it's a fabulous. These two, and why do they not make wagons like that anymore? High wires. Your wires when you have a parade in a city. The viaducts, the bridges nowadays. Therefore, you will never see a wagon made like this again, both of these. This wagon, the reason that I'm showing this wagon is, it was built in 1892 by the Millers, who are the first cousins of the Ringlings right here in Baraboo, Wisconsin. When they built this wagon, all of things that you see yellow or so was gold leaf. It was all gold leaf. They found this wagon in about 1905, 1910, anyways, in Texas, in some ranch back in Texas. They called up the Circus World Museum. They sent somebody down. All of the gold was scratched off. It was down to the plain wood. Yes, it was a wagon built by the Millers. Therefore, we took this wagon. While I'm at the subject, every wagon we have here, about 200, in which we've restored about 80, have been restored to the original condition and been in a circus that we think we've gone back 4 times, 5 times, 6 times. I'm not going to tell you that we hit it all the time, but we go back as far as we can to tell you who was the original, not only maker of the wagon, but the original name of the wagon and what it had to begin with. Now, this was scratched off. We painted it. We painted it this almost like gold color, and therefore it is now what we call the Swan wagon, made by the Millers for Baraboo, by the Ringling Brothers in 1892. These wagons that you see with bars are called cage wagons, C-A-G-E. These cage wagons had wild animals in them. They would be, as a center ring, would have different leopards, tigers, lions, and so forth. They'd come in, and there'd be 7 or 8 in the center ring. Okay, over here, a door or chute. And this is, you'd line them up. Behind the curtain, you'd line the wagons up, the cage wagons that were built like this, open these up, and the first animal, there'd be 3 animals in each one of these cage wagons, for example. The first one out will be the last one in, because behind the curtain, you would have the helpers opening up the 3 cages that are in each wagon. Now, I remember, and I like to tell you this story. I remember when I took our grandson, Joel, he happens to be the youngest grandson that I have, and I took him on my tours. When he was maybe 5, 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, he would come on my tours. He probably could give them better than I can even today. But I'd take him. We were watching the Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus in Madison, Wisconsin. All of a sudden, here's the center ring. They're going to come out, the wild animals. You know, they have places to stand and so forth, if you ever been to the circus. He says, Grandpa, remember where that first animal will be? And remember where the last one, well, sure enough, the first one jumped up on the place, and the last one, there was 8 that time, jumped up. Remember now, that first one's going to be the last one in, and that last one's going to be the first one in. And we forgot about it. They went through their act. Everything was fine, and it's done. And sure enough, towards the end of the act, what happened? Exactly how he pointed it out. And he said, Grandpa, did you notice that? I said, yes, I did. Well, to tell you the truth, he talked loud enough that the people behind us poked him and said, little boy, you seem to know a lot about the circus. He said, yes. Well, were you ever in? He said, I used to be in the circus. Which was, that's a fable, but that was really funny. Grandma, my wife, and I, we had a laugh. And the people back there said, see, he knows a lot about the circus. So it goes to show you, to this day, I tell that story, and people enjoy it very much. This is the only Irish wagon we have from an Irish and an Ireland circus. The Hannaford Circus is still in existence today. About 5, 6 years ago, the Irish people in the area raised enough money to gold leaf this wagon. This wagon is gold leaf. But the big story about it is the 6th generation grandson of Mr. Hannaford came for the dedication. He sat right up there. A real nice young guy, I think maybe 40 years old or something. And such a great guy. And when we had the dedication, he had like tears in his eyes. The 6th generation grandson sat in the same seat that all of his former grandfathers did, and his dad did, for the circus in Ireland. And again, like I told you, look at the small wheels. This is about 150 years old, this wagon, and it's all gold leaf, and the circus is still in existence. Joshua Stoddard in 1850 invented the calliope, and the word was calliope. Since it's been coming to America, people use, and this is the only time I'll ever use it, calliope. Terrible word. So we don't use it in circus language at all. They're all calliopes. We have 6 calliopes. Sometimes there's steam, sometimes electric, sometimes a type of a calliope that they have in the places today, which have a player piano. There are different types. Now, this is one of them that we have. The next thing I'm going to ask you, how many people here have seen or read Water for Elephants? Water for Elephants was a movie. Water for Elephants was a book, one of the best-selling books. In the book, the name was Bizzini Circus. There is no, was no, never have been, has been a Bizzini Circus. But they could not use Ringling, Barnum and Bailey, Sells Floto, or anything else, because those are trademarks. Therefore, they used the name Bizzini. They picked up 7 of our wagons. We transported them down via flat trucks to California, to the movie industry. They painted them all red. We know what these wagons were before. We knew exactly, and we're going to restore them and maybe keep 2 out of the 7 to the original. 2 will be Bizzini's, and the other 5 will be what they originally were. Now, these wagons went to California, stayed in California for the movie, and then came back to Baraboo. We're going to, like I mentioned, repaint them to what they were originally. So there is a little history.
So when the Circus World Museum first receives a wagon and they want to restore it, how do they know what the original colors and what the wagon was?
We go to the library. By the way, I forgot to tell you this. Every wagon that is in a regular circus has a number on it. Sometimes you'll see a duplicate number. The numbers are used for two reasons. One, you're joining the circus. You were assigned that wagon. That wagon can be for the instruments, it could be for the tents, it could be the food, it could be the costumes, it could be anything. You were assigned to work on that wagon. The second reason, the circuses went from city to city to city. They'd have a map. On this map, the back 40, the back 80, whatever it is, every spot would have a number where that wagon would be placed when the circus comes to that town. So you wouldn't have chaos. 20, 10, 8, 6, whatever it is, and you wouldn't have chaos. That's why in going through all of our wagons, there's numbers. We go in to the library, we sit down, we go back as far as we can, we look at the circus name, we look at the number and everything. We don't always hit it, but we go as far back as we can, and we'll find number 20 from the Sells Floto Circus was a blue wagon that had Mother Goose theme on it, that had whatever it happens to be, and then we try to restore it to that color. That's how we do it. The small wagons you see, not all of them are this small, they're a little bigger, but not for the big, large wagons. They're from used to have a dog and pony show, they call. Some circuses could not afford the very large wagons, but they had smaller ones for the smaller lions, the smaller cubs, the smaller apes, or whatever you happen to be. Pony, they call the dog and pony wagons. We have, but they were in original circuses. This was number 79, and I don't know what circus it was in, but we have about 10 of these left from not what the grandpa bought for his grandson, but in an original circus. This wagon, the two hemisphere wagon. On the other side, it has Western Hemisphere. This side, it has Eastern Hemisphere. This is our largest and heaviest wagon that we own. 17,000 pounds, 8.5 ton, this wagon. This is the wagon that was pulled by 40 horses. 40 horses. 4 abreast, 10 in a row. How many people have seen that? You have. This was in the Milwaukee Parade about 12, 15 years ago. That was the last time this wagon was in a parade. But this wagon that you're seeing here today was built in 1903 for the big year that the Barnum and Bailey came back to America from the European trip. The same people from Iowa have the 40-horse hitch to this day. Think of a block. As a horse, lead horse, 40, is turning the block, the wagon is halfway down the block. That's how long it is. You also notice how thick these wheels are. They bought these wagon and the wagon from a company that was in, shall we say, Europe, and they built these wagons for them. Eastern and Western Hemisphere wagon. See, that's like the cage wagon over there. Here, that would be for a pony wagon.
Okay.
Dog and pony show. You see the difference there? And there's the numbers on these wagons.
Okay.
And by the way, a wagon is called a tableau.